illusions pertaining to the past is an aspect of human experience that can be discussed. What are illusions that pertain to the past? Well, we can begin by um, thinking about our common conceptions concerned with the past. One such conception has it that, even if it's just a feeling and it's not really explicated, it's the feeling that there is some sort of qualitative break between what I take to be modernity, what I take to be the present, and history and the past. Where exactly that break falls probably depends on the given person and his or her personal conceptions in view of education, in view of whatever. So, for example, it could be that having born in the '60s, my feeling is that the '60s and onward is, it's life, it's real life, it's the present, it's modernity. The '50s, maybe, '40s, but the '30s, the '20s, no, that's something else. Having been born in the 21st century, perhaps then I feel that the 20th century, that was really something different. That was just, I don't know what that is. If I even, in some cases, have heard of it at all. Although hopefully those cases are few. All of us probably, to some or another extent, if we bring the timeline back far enough, the 1800s, the 1700s, the 1600s, the 1500s, we suppose that that is history. That is really something different. The Roman times, the Greek times. But if we do try to put these feelings into words, we try to reason them out, we see that there is no room to draw some sort of hard and fast line um, in history or concerned with the temporal, such as would break things up in this way. Here's modernity, here's reality, here's the present, and there's the past, there's history, there's those people. First of all, what we mean by history would probably be concepts that particular individuals have to have. And whereas we do say that there is a impersonal, objective succession of developments and of events, however they would be construed, ultimately we would have to, it does seem, take some or another subjective perspective. Would we refer to any so-called time in history? Roman times, aside from being a concept in my mind today, would have to refer to the experience of this Roman, of that Roman, of this concrete person, aged as he or she was, with the interest that he or she had, and so on. That being one reason why something such as time travel is preposterous, because we're objectifying subjective experience. We're supposing that there just simply was something that was not seen from a given point of view, that was not predicated on the apperceptive scheme, meaning the personal perceptions and understandings of a particular person, such as was simply out there and I could just somehow travel to it. Well, we see that that is not sound, to say the least. Particular lives are being led, and they could translate to concretizations for others, meaning I live my life now and I have these interests and I like this and I like that. Um, and that translates into kind of how my body moves. And somebody could see that and say, oh, that person is on that continent. That person is did what he or she did in connection with these dates on the calendar. But it's still, in itself here is my life and my subjective experience. So we see there's certainly no room to actually draw any kind of hard and fast line and say that before then was history and those historical people, and now it's us and modernity. And we can further drive the point home by thinking about that, unless, goodness forbid, um, humanity comes to a finish sometime soon, goodness forbid, we hopefully will roll on as a species, and consequently, there will be a point on a calendar where a person just like us could sit there and correctly contemplate that 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, hopefully, there were people alive like me, such as lived at the beginning, towards the beginning of the 21st century. But we say that just because somebody could one day do that, it doesn't make us in any way historical in some kind of strange way. It doesn't make us, well, we could say that, but again, in that kind of naive, thoughtless sense, like, oh, we're not real people, we're just historical people. No, we're also real people. Even if somebody could one day say, oh, these people lived 50,000 years ago, it doesn't make us further special. It doesn't turn our junk into treasure. And speaking of which, that could be another illusion concerned with the past that it could be worth um, debunking. That being that time could make junk turn into treasure in and of its own self. Now, what cannot be and should not be denied is that the passage of time can add sentimental worth to just about anything. Perhaps for the reason that if something occurred in my own personal um, life history, and then enough phases of mental, emotional maturation went by, then that which occurred at an earlier such point, uh, so far as I do remember it, it can hold for me some kind of particular significance. Obvious examples of which being stuffed animals that we had as children, special blankets we had as children, even really anything, a tiny little trinket that we find, oh, that's when I was 5 years old. Wow. Um, a little note that, I write, oh, this is what I need at the grocery store. If I just let 50 years go by, that note will have some personal interest for me, maybe even 10 years, and I won't want to throw it out. So things can acquire this purely subjective, idiosyncratic interest, which is not bad at all. Obviously, that's part of normal experience. But at the same time, time, the passage of time does not automatically give things that have no value aside from that possible sentimental value. So, for instance, if I, as a child, scribbled a little drawing, as children do, without exceptional artistic ability, and then I let 20 years go by, that little drawing that I drew 20 years ago, as a child, it can, and we could say should, if I'm in touch with my emotions, have some emotional relevance to me. Some kind of sentimentality can be attached to that drawing or painting or what have you. Oh, well, that's when I was 5, that's when I was 8, whatever. Fine. But those 20 years passing did nothing to change the intrinsic quality of the drawing, obviously. They didn't add anything to it. And just so with something such as, for instance, um, literature. Right? If I write some kind of corny little short story, again, let 30 years go by, and it could be and would perhaps would be interesting to read it and see what I was thinking back then. Oh yeah, that's it's going through this time and there's a story, no problem. But it's not going to turn that into high literature just because 30 years went by. It's not how it works. So we say that we can apply this same obvious kind of point to history at large and consider the emotional relations we hold with the things of the past. We say that just as in a personal history, if time goes by, that can add sentimentality to any given trinket, any given little thing. Time passing historically, as we call it, 1,000 years passing, 2,000 years, 10,000 years, whatever, can add a sense of interest and sort of historical sentimentality to what is thus found. So, for example, finding trash from so-called ancient times, a bunch of broken shards of pottery, it can be interesting. Perhaps it can help to illuminate how communities used to live, what the habits were concerned with food consumption, agricultural habits, war. You find arrowhead, you find weapons. It's interesting. It can help us write the story of the past. But this feeling that we have oftentimes that just because some time went by, 5,000 years went by, and now what was then trash has turned into true treasure, aside from that strictly subjective sentimentality, that would seem to be not really warranted. Right? Where we, for example, take some sort of literature that was trash in its day, and we think that just because 200 years has gone by, now this has turned into quality literature. Oh, you don't understand. That's a book written in the 1750s. It must have some worth. No, it must not at all. Some sort of art that was not high quality in its day. Let 50,000 years go by. It's not going to turn into high quality art. That point is important because it points to the necessity of excellence, objectively speaking, for things to have value. Sentimentality can add personal value, again, to anything. I can be personally attached and have some sort of personal emotional connection to any given little thing. But excellence is not so easy to come by. And real excellence arguably stands or can stand above time, at least metaphorically speaking. So, for example, if something was truly excellent from an artistic point of view, thousands of years ago, in ancient Greek times, it still is excellent. As we see, amazing statues displayed in museums all across the world, amazing vases, and so on, that have value in an atemporal way, meaning it's not just because they were made thousands of years ago. They have the same value if they were made today, yesterday, whenever, in the future, because they're excellent. They bring out some sort of idea or ideal and impose it on concrete material in a way that it requires a tremendous amount of craftsmanship, skill, and such. For example, a statue like David of Michelangelo, something like that. Or something such as literature, philosophy. Something is excellent from that point of view and really accurately and ideally, beautifully um, points or directs our attention, should we say, to something in reality, something that is really so, um, permanently so. It doesn't matter if it's an inscription found or a little papyrus found thousands of years ago. It doesn't matter if it's written today. It's above then time. It can have value atemporally versus something that has little value. For example, some kind of juicy gossip in the newspaper today. That does not have value or much value, at least it can have, again, that emotional value for me. That does not have objective excellence. Even today, it doesn't matter that it was written just a few hours ago. By no stretch of the imagination does that have more value than because of something written that is excellent thousands of years ago. So we see that really internalizing that can help us to have equal vision as it concerns any and all content, whatever date on the calendar it is associated with. A person, for example, that was not exactly the epitome of human excellence and nobility and such, just because a few centuries pass by, that person doesn't change. But we see that when we don't remember that, we can take a historical person, quote unquote, and think, oh, that's a historical person. Don't you know who said that? Such and such person said it, who lived like 250 years ago. Oh my goodness, no. Imagine that that person was alive today. What kind of value would they have? Imagine that what I'm reading was written today, accounting perhaps for, as it happens, some linguistic changes. Right? Any text can be modernized to keep its meaning, accounting for that. Would it have value today? Imagine that a painting, a sculpture was made today. Would it have value? We see that by thinking like that, we can bring everything into today, so to say, and also not today in the sort of calendar sense, as in, oh, it's only because today is such and such day, but today as in our current living reality. We can bring everything into that current living reality. We can strip it of its historical sentimentality and simply consider its worth and excellence. An excellent person, a great human being, is great from any period of history associated with any long lost empire, current country, or whatever. An excellent piece of human accomplishment, again, in the form of art, in the form of literature, in the form of innovation, is excellent. Period. It's above time. It can be brought into that living present that I have, hopefully, and that I can hopefully develop. So we see again, to summarize, that for some other reason, history, or the thought of history, the thought, of time passing, oftentimes casts a spell on our thinking. We think something was a long time ago. Oh my goodness, right? This is a little shard of pottery from 5,000 years ago. Wow. If this was a shard of pottery from today, would it have value? Probably not much. Right? This is trash from Neolithic, Paleolithic, whatever times. Wow. Does today's trash have value? Today's trash will one day, so far as it survives, be from 1,000 years ago, from 5,000 years ago. If somebody in 5,000 years picks up a plastic water bottle, is it really worth their time to be amazed and impressed by it? Again, in some limited way. Okay, cool. Look what my ancestors, they were drinking out of this thing. Maybe they'll have something else. Maybe plastic will be gone. Who's to say? So it can have some limited worth. But if that person in 5,000 years takes his or her mind away from eternal truths, from his or her own um, present day ethical improvement, to really be fascinated, to really idolize this water bottle that we threw out, that would just be ridiculous. The empty water bottle has little value today, aside from being able to refill it and use it to drink, and it'll never acquire much more value than that. Just so with everything from the past, that limited value, that instrumental value of helping us to paint a picture of kind of where we came from, whatever that's worth. Other than that, trash remains trash. Excellence remains excellence. Bring everything into my living present, into my hopefully increasingly rich and valuable inner world, and evaluate everything on the same footing with the same yardstick, disregarding the calendar, disregarding the myths and the illusions and the spells of the past and the passage of time in history. So we can think about it. Thank you for listening.